33% of Americans have difficulty paying their bills on time. 56% do not use a budget to manage their household expenses. 44% of households lack adequate savings to pay 3 months of basic expenses. And 1 in 4 are financially underserved, meaning that they're not even banking. And those statistics certainly hold true in New York City. So for a company like Citi, how do we address this issue? Well, we certainly can't do it by ourselves. We need partners that are thought leaders that can come up with us to sit at the table and come up with innovative, impactful programs that are really sustainable and that are really scalable, that serve a lot of individuals in need. So I'm actually here today to talk a little bit about the municipal partnership that we have in New York City. Citi has been very, very successful in the Bloomberg administration, working with a number of different city agencies. But the one that I think is near and dear to my heart, and the one that we've been able to really move the needle to serve low and moderate income individuals, was really working with Commissioner Mintz and the Department of Consumer Affairs, the Office of Financial Empowerment. Citi has been a partner with Commissioner Mintz since the inception of the Office of Financial Empowerment, which I guess goes back to about 2008. 2008, what happened that was very significant for me and for Citi is that Commissioner Mintz appointed me to the advisory board for the Office of Financial Empowerment. And it was working on that board that I knew for a fact that this was the way Citi could partner with the City of New York on a program that Commissioner Mintz and his staff developed that really could make a significant difference to New Yorkers on their ability to move their needle, you might say, on their savings and their reducing their debt, maybe changing their credit scores, saving, and hopefully down the end of the road, maybe by asset building. So with that being said, I will say that we supported this effort not just with philanthropy. As I said, I was on the board, but we invested about $1.2 million to grow the financial empowerment centers in New York City and support other programs around that as well. I'm not going to steal the thunder from Commissioner Mintz, but since OFE has started, over 20 million New Yorkers have been served by the financial empowerment centers, which we think is right. Absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say million? Oh, I would wish it'd be million. It's 20,000. And there are other statistics that I'm sure Commissioner Mintz will share with you too. One other thing that we're especially proud of with this work is that in 2011, in Mayor Bloomberg's State of the City address, he baselined, in other words, put the financial empowerment centers in the budget so that moving forward, the free financial services that OFE offers could be sustained so New Yorkers will continue to have this amazing service. So we felt that our investment as a financial institution was really well made because we helped change policy in the City of New York, policy that's really going to help low and moderate income people get to the next level. And through this effort, Cities for Financial Empowerment was created, and now we're here today to discuss how other financial empowerment centers are being opened up across the United States nationally. So we're really proud to be here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce Commissioner Mintz and Megan, and they're going to tell you a little bit about themselves and the work that they're doing. And then the next part will be, I will be asking the most riveting, challenging questions of Commissioner Mintz and Megan, and we really want all of you to participate. I should have brought tissues up because I know you're going to be really trembling and sweating when I start asking these questions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Mintz, and he can tell you a little bit about himself and the amazing work that he's been able to accomplish in New York City and with the Cities for Financial Empowerment.
Thanks, Eileen. My new favorite reason to love Eileen is that she kind of reminds me of my daughter's making up numbers. Like there are a cajillion people that we've served in New York, just under a cajillion.
Just don't tell my boss.
No. So I'm going to take you on a 6-year journey in about 4 minutes, and we'll see how that goes. I'd much rather get to the questions. Asset building isn't new. New York City certainly didn't invent it, but the concept of bringing municipal value add to that field is something that we have been exploring with a lot of very exciting success. And so I want to talk a little bit about how that happened, and then what we are seeing and why this movement is spreading to cities across the country. The mayor put together a blue ribbon panel. Mayor Bloomberg put together a blue ribbon panel to discuss innovative approaches to fighting poverty. And naturally, there was a trite reference somewhere in the report to we need more financial education. And honestly, you could just fall into a coma, every time you see somebody suggest that there ought to be more financial education. But Mayor Bloomberg, rather than just sort of saying, yes, of course, more financial education, started asking real questions like, well, who does financial education in the city, and why, and what measurable outcomes do you get? Questions that people in the financial education field are always very nervous about because it's very hard to answer them. When they approached me, I run a regulatory agency called the Department of Consumer Affairs. We regulate market fairness, used car dealers, debt collectors, et cetera, et cetera. He asked us to think about what cities could uniquely bring, in particular New York City, could uniquely bring to this mix of thinking about people's finances. We spent a fair amount of time thinking about what we weren't going to try to be. We were not going to try to reinvent a front door to public benefits. We were not going to try to be all things to all people. Those were really entrenched systems well known to city government. Instead, we started thinking about what we call financial empowerment. We thought about financial counseling. We thought about safe banking. We thought about asset building. And given the DNA of our agency, we thought about consumer financial protections. We created this Office of Financial Empowerment within the Department of Consumer Affairs. And one of the early examples of where we started to recognize the power of city government in this space actually came in the banking context, and then I'm going to switch to financial counseling. We had a really interesting program that the mayor was running where they were going to be sending out pulses of money to people over a couple of years, every couple of months. And we knew in our office that these people were going to be largely unbanked. And we said, well, here's an interesting opportunity. And so we pulled together the banks and the credit unions in the city and said, we're about to go public with this program. We're about to be pushing out X million dollars through it. And if you can offer us an account with the following terms, we'll sell that account at account registration. We will use some behavioral economic tools or tricks, depending on who I'm talking to, and really make it look like you have to get a bank account to have this money directly deposited. Our ability to leverage a large population and to be able to pull into the room banking partners as terrific as Citi, as they were at the beginning, to be able to offer that account, then translated into our power to structure the program so that when people were signing up for the program, and we sort of structured in the way that I just described, we went from a population that was 55% unbanked at the beginning of program registration to like 4% unbanked within a few weeks because everybody thought that they needed the account. We were putting our name in front of the account, and it was from multiple providers so that they didn't have to decide, do I trust a bank or not, or which bank do I trust? They really just had to say, well, this seems safe, and at the time it was very important to us to leverage out overdraft. And so that was just one example of where we saw that our ability to leverage partnerships, our ability to structure the way programs really had some very tangible benefits to something like access to banking, which generally has been more in the realm of public awareness campaigns. And this was really a very hands-on approach. We then took a look at what supposedly started our office, which was do more financial education. And we realized there's some really wonderful pressures in city government. One is the newspapers. If you screw something up, you're going to hear about it and you're going to suffer. And that's a very helpful, and I really mean that, it's a very helpful pressure when it comes to making sure that your programs are high quality. And we knew that if we were really going to be doing something valuable, we weren't just going to put together yet another website. We weren't going to say to the incredible nonprofit organizations in the city of New York. Well, now Bloomberg is here, and we've got our Bloomberg curriculum on. That wasn't going to add any value. It was just going to anger our partners. And so instead, we asked ourselves what we thought was the hardest question, which was, at scale, could you provide the gold standard of education, which is actually one-on-one counseling? Could you actually put a mayor in front of a camera and say to New York, if you're struggling with your finances, we will help you, and really mean it? And so thanks to funding from Citi, initially, we opened up our first center. We professionally trained our counselors. You always set your stock value high. We made sure that the training was coming from local institutions with credit-bearing courses. The counseling was free. And we started getting some early returns of very measurable outcomes. We have very specific outcomes in New York and through our replication cities. As you know, if you reduce debt, doesn't count unless you've reduced debt. I think it's 5%, 10% of debt. If you are going to satisfy the savings outcome, it's 5% of your income, right? I think it's 2%. Sorry, as you can see, I'm another guy. It's a cajillion%. At any rate, we started having these very unmemorable performance outcomes, but we started achieving genuine savings. And when our counselors, for example, were sitting with people and saying, you owe this credit card company $4,000, let's pick up the phone. Picking up the phone and saying, $1,200 of this is nonsense. It's late fees and silliness, and let's wipe those off and put together a real payment plan. We started adding up how we were helping our clients wipe that money off the books and then starting to pay off the books. And as we started recognizing that this was going pretty well, albeit with only 1 or 2 centers at the time, then the economy went to hell. And the mayor turned to us and said, this is looking good, people need help, we can't ignore people's personal financial situations and the impact that it's having, and we're all learning in a very painful way back then, finally, the impact that people's personal financial instability had on communities and on local economies. And so we ramped up our financial empowerment centers, these free one-on-one professional counseling centers, across the city, thanks to private funding, and that's the way it needs to start. You need to make the case. And as Eileen noted, over these last several years, we went from a couple of centers that were privately funded. We now have over 30 centers in New York. They are part of the public budget. We are about to announce actually our 25,000th client. Don't tell the press yet. We've saved $1 cajillion. And we've saved almost $14 million individually for these people. Very real metrics. And so when the mayor was faced a couple years ago with a $5 billion budget deficit, I can assure you that he wasn't calling his commissioners saying, do you have any ideas of new things to put in the budget? But this did go into the budget because it had such measurable outcomes. This idea that cities can structure programs that offer these services is only the beginning of our journey, because what we also soon found out was that not only were these counseling sessions incredibly, tangibly helpful for the people who had come in, but little by little, my partners in other agencies who were suffering with their own burdens in the anti-poverty field started coming to us and saying, we need help too. We're having trouble moving people out of shelter. We're doing one-shot rental assistance, and we don't think it's helping. We've got domestic violence victims that are coming back 6, 7 times, and the number one reason is because of their finances. You seem to have this gem here that everyone seems sort of interested in, this unusually quantifiable benefit of this financial counseling. And little by little, we started partnering with our sister agencies and recognizing something that we've come to call the supervitamin effect, which was not just that we could say, here's what a counseling session has achieved, but we could start to say, here is the host effect. Here's how we are moving more people out of shelter. Here's how we are getting domestic violence recidivism down, et cetera, et cetera. So I assume we'll talk more about that in a moment, but this supervitamin effect for us was really the difference between, isn't this a great program, and is this the answer to some of the more intractable problems that we are having in the social service world, where the demand is going up and the resources are going down? Is this innovative approach to integrating financial empowerment tools like a bank account into a summer youth employment program, like financial counseling into prisoner reentry programs, et cetera, wasn't something that we could see some real value in. At the same time, we created a national coalition of other cities that were also manipulating the levers that they had at their disposal, the powers and the programs and the politics. And the Cities for Financial Empowerment Coalition, which New York co-chairs with San Francisco, and a bunch of other really leading cities, started recognizing these not just political benefits, let's be frank, those can be very helpful, but also very tangible benefits for their residents. We wanted to push more of this work out to other cities. We created a nonprofit funding arm called the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund. And among the other grants that we have put out there was a grant to replicate these financial empowerment centers. Lansing was one of 5 cities that won the grant. We had 48 cities apply. Lansing had a terrific partnership that they put together. They really understood what it would take to put together the right program and to put together the right integration opportunities that made sense for Lansing to prove this super vitamin effect so that you could really get a sustainable set of services. So I'm very excited to be here. You're going to hear more about the work. Our friends from Lansing are here. You'll introduce them in a second. And I'm really thrilled to get to talk about this.
Thank you, Jonathan. Megan?
So good afternoon, everyone. I am Megan Kursik with the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan. We're very happy to have all of you here in Detroit for the summit. I believe it's the first summit to leave DC, correct? Yeah. So I coordinate the Michigan Communities for Financial Empowerment Network at CEDAM. And I wanted to ask really quickly, we were talking before, wondering the exact makeup of the audience. So if you could raise your hand or stand up if you represent a local government and you're in the room. So 2. How about if you represent a state community economic development association? And that's what we were expecting. And so for my introduction, I'm looking to sort of bring us back to state community economic development associations and why CEDAM, as an association in Michigan, decided to begin supporting municipal financial empowerment as a new field in the asset building realm and in municipal services. And what you can do as state associations, if this piques your interest, if this makes sense, what you can begin to do to support local governments in your respective states to embrace these new strategies, being proliferated across the country by the CFE Coalition and then the new replication sites that are grantees of the CFE Fund. So I thought I would walk through why CEDAM started MCFE. And if it's okay, I'll just use the acronym from here on out so I don't have a mouthful. And then what we specifically, the specific supports that we've provided to local governments in Michigan to begin to delve into this new space. And so we began MCFE in October of 2011. And this came out of a couple of factors. So the first factor was we saw anecdotal evidence across the state that many of our members, ranging from CDCs to local governments, most often community development departments, other nonprofits, other community-based organizations, we're all starting to delve into this space of financial empowerment services. There had an interest. There seems to be a slight, there's a moment in the industry right now in community development where we're switching from just supporting affordable housing to supporting a variety of different pieces of supporting both individuals and communities to create a truly vibrant community. And so we've seen anecdotal evidence that many of our members were starting to actually have financial empowerment services, but we did notice that there seemed to be, just generally speaking, a lack of standards, outcome-driven models, and professional training in that space. And so you did have some organizations who would go through specific training programs and offer specific curriculum, but you also had other organizations who might put together a budgeting workshop, but we didn't really know the background of the person who created it and what the outcomes were, and there may not have been anything built in for evaluation of the program. So we saw a need for outcome-driven models, evaluation, and professionalization in that space. Then we also saw that there was a need for some resources and capacity, especially around technical assistance and funding, to help get our members really doing this work well and in an outcome-driven manner. And then the other piece of other factor that led to CEDAM creating MCFE is I happened upon the CFE Coalition, the Cities for Financial Empowerment Coalition, co-chaired by Commissioner Mintz. And I had been doing a scan of asset building initiatives across the country, thinking where should CEDAM go in the asset building world. And what I kept coming back to were examples of very strong evidence-based programs that were coming out of city governments, all members of the CFE Coalition. I also noticed that none of those member cities were in Michigan. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if our community members in the state of Michigan would have access to supports like a financial empowerment center, like free tax assistance services at scale. And so I wanted to find a way to support our local governments to begin to work in this space. And with this discovery of the CFE Coalition, I came to a very technical conclusion. I'm trying to out a joke here. So my technical conclusion was that local governments leading community asset building or financial empowerment initiatives are really a magic ingredient or like magic sauce to make those community-based financial empowerment initiatives reach scale and include usual and unusual suspects. So we oftentimes will see nonprofits working in this space, but do we have the full range of financial institutions in the community? Do we have higher ed? Do we have employers? And local governments really have an ability to pull together all the right people and create a truly community-wide initiative. And so we created, as I said, in 2011, we created the Michigan Communities for Financial Empowerment Network. We use the term communities because in Michigan, we have a number of services, core supportive services are administered through county governments. And so we thought that county governments could be instrumental in this space as well. So we expanded to the term communities. We have 4 core goals, and we actually just stole those goals from the CFE Coalition. So first, we support local initiatives that improve access to financial information through financial counseling, improve access to quality financial products and services, access to opportunities to save and build assets, and then the last goal is to protect consumers in the financial marketplace. And then in CEDAM space, CEDAM provides a number of supports to our local government network members. The first being training. So I provide in-person and webinar trainings, really starting actually with the concept of municipal financial empowerment. There's 12 member cities of the CFE Coalition. So, 12 compared to I don't know how many thousands of cities in this nation. It's definitely a new field and a new line of work for local government. And so many times my first training with local government representatives is just what is the concept of municipal financial empowerment? What is the super vitamin effect? And what do strategies look like? And who are their peers doing this throughout the country? Then I've started to build in trainings on specific strategies, and we also make sure to connect our network members with trainings provided by national entities like the CFE Fund that speak to specific municipal strategies across the country in this space. I also provide technical assistance services, so helping communities with project development and implementation, with fund development. Again, this connection to the national movement, I have the time to continue to do scans of what's out there, keep up on the most recent publications from various cities, offices of financial empowerment, so I can make sure to always have that in my toolbox and be able to connect our local leaders with it in Michigan. And then I also help our local governments with thinking about how do we evaluate this work and make sure that we're not just doing great work, but setting ourselves up with the correct evaluation measures to allow for sustainability. And then the last piece that, the last support that CEDAM provides is funding assistance. So through our funding arm for our network, we're able to sub-grant to additional local governments in the state to replicate financial empowerment strategies. The first strategy that we will be providing sub-granting support to will be the Financial Empowerment Center model. And we are doing that because we were very lucky. One of my technical assistance projects was to support the City of Lansing in applying to the CFE Fund's national replication of financial empowerment centers. So we're extremely lucky, Michigan, we now will have a base of expertise around this model. We're looking to capitalize on that by supporting other communities in the state to replicate that approach. And as we move through time, we hope to continue to expand that sub-granting and technical assistance to other strategies used by member cities of the CFE Coalition. I think that concludes everything just to introduce the Michigan Communities for Financial Empowerment Network, and we can go ahead and jump into the questions.
Thank you, Megan. We'd like this to be very interactive, so before I ask the compelling questions that I have, I would like to open it up to the audience. Based on what you just heard, are there any questions that you might have or any comments that you might want to make at this time? We'd be really happy to hear from you. Yes?
We've heard a lot about how you measure success with financial empowerment centers and financial opportunity centers and financial empowerment as a whole. But how is Citi measuring success by being involved in these programs, and what is your success measure?
Well, I guess there's success at different levels when you're working with individuals and families. But I think what we consider success is when we see behavior changes. We started down the road many years ago just by providing financial education. We thought it was important to develop a curriculum. We thought it was important to pull together individuals into a classroom setting and provide them with the information that we had. And then we started to think, well, that's just not enough. It's just not enough. So the fact that we can work with the Office of Financial Empowerment, the fact that they have trained counselors that really know what they're doing to do one-on-one counseling, and that they are tracking so we can see behavior changes. We can see that somebody is creating a budget, and that's really assisting that family because it's giving them more discretionary income that they can use. And with that discretionary income, they are maybe savings. They opened up a bank account. These are all behavior changes. So I think behavior change is really what Citi is looking for. And of course, down the road, what we're hoping is that people really start building assets. I mean, that's really the
I just want to jump on that
cake.
real quickly, the same idea. Eileen mentioned earlier, seed funding from Citibank allowed us to prove our case to get public funding. As a funder, that's pretty much the top of the heap in terms of whether or not you've made a good investment, you've made an investment that matters. But Eileen also was telling you, you'll notice, she was talking about the metrics of these centers. I talk about the metrics of the centers. The nonprofits that we fund through our procurement contracts talk about the metrics of the centers. And not to be too touchy-feely, but they're shared metrics. They are very tangible shared metrics, and I think that that's part of the nature of this municipal work. I mean, I think we all know this in our work. It's never just about what you're doing. It's about what you're able to leverage and how the partnerships can flesh it all out together.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Great. Yes.
Hi, I guess my questions are two. One, are you doing this directly through your office? Are you hiring counselors, or you're doing this through the nonprofits in the area and having them do this work?
It's a little bit of a hybrid. The short answer is that we are publicly contracting with nonprofit organizations, but we are running the system. So we set the training goals, we operate the central database, and the reason we do it is not just because I'm the firstborn and I'm bossy, but also because, and and this is the municipal piece of this. There are things that you can uniquely do when these programs are part of public services, like integrate them into some of the other social service delivery streams that I was mentioning before. If we were just funding a nonprofit to go do something and couldn't somehow figure out apples to apples equations about what the centers across the city were achieving, and that a savings outcome here was the same thing as a savings outcome there, if we weren't able to recognize those benefits, we wouldn't be able to make the case for the public funding. We wouldn't be able to make the case to sister agencies that this might help solve one of their problems if they weave it into their system. So the public ownership, I think, really has been the pathway to scale and to sustainability. And so the model is a little bit of a hybrid.
Okay, I see more. And the other part of my question was, have you thought of, maybe Kathy didn't mention it, combining it with some sort of like IDA component, some matched savings component, so they could?
We do have one of our 4 pillars is about savings. I'm glad you asked. I didn't get to talk about that before. We did not pursue IDAs. I'll be frank. I have never seen IDAs work at scale, and we have literally a million EITC eligible New Yorkers, to give you some sense of what scale has to mean when government steps in and says, we're going to try to take this on. So we've actually piloted a different approach to savings, which is a matched savings program at tax time. It was originally called Save NYC. It's now being replicated in cities around the country as something called Save USA, where people were splitting their refund and splitting part of it into like a CD. And if they left it there for a year, then we were doing a match, 50 cents on the dollar. That program was designed for scale. It's through the tax code, and I'm very excited to say that just a couple of weeks ago, we had a bill introduced in the House that would turn this into federal tax policy. I'm not holding my breath that that's going to happen, but it's getting there. So I think, I think there are 2 interesting things about your question. One is, of course, savings are really important, but the second is that for municipalities, the challenge and the blessing of the challenge is it has to be scale.
Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was just going to clarify too, we were thinking before this session how we would try to get every detail about municipal financial empowerment in, and it's pretty impossible. We do have some various materials at the back, but I wanted to clarify in terms of the question about a matched savings component. Financial empowerment centers are just one of many strategies used by city governments in this financial empowerment space, and so it's definitely not the end all and the only strategy. There's actually a number of strategies, and we have a document in the back that actually lists this full menu.
Yes, sir.
I was actually interested in the discipline of the counselors at these nonprofits to not provide the services that you're talking about, but to enter all this information into a system that you then manage. You're talking about having a central database. One part of the question was the discipline that you had to, kind of initiate that momentum on there. And secondly is, did you actually proprietarily build this system, or was this something that you were able to find a resource that was sort of out of the box?
We started from the beginning knowing that we were trying to make this case, right? And so we knew that we had to make the case with data. That's who my boss is, luckily. And so we wanted to make sure that we were capturing the information that could really change the conversation about financial education from how many people sat in a class or looked at a website, as great as classes and websites can be, but how many people literally achieved how many dollar-based outcomes. And so we worked with a system called Efforts to Outcomes, ETO, and have pretty significantly modified the program. And ETO has been very largely cooperative with us, in part because they knew that we were going to be replicating across the country. As my colleagues in Lansing can tell you, this central database is now no longer just a New York central database. It's a central database that also now includes our replication partners as well, because I'm trying to tell national story here as well. I believe that primary funding streams need to incorporate, for example, one-on-one financial counseling. You can't ignore people's financial instability. And this is sort of the supervitamin effect a little bit that I was talking about. Think about job workforce development. You can spend a huge amount of time and a lot of resources, which already have their recognized funding streams, to get somebody a job. But if their car breaks down and they don't have the $300 to fix it and they don't show up for work, they're going to be back at your program and you're going to be reinvesting to get them another job. The idea that addressing people's financial stability is not just a good in and of itself, but one that makes the other primary anti-poverty investments more sustainable investments is, I think, the big idea. And that's where I believe that state partners can really start to be big players here, because they're the ones that really direct the way a lot of these block grants get spent, and they're the ones that are seeing the needle not moving in the direction that they needed to move. So that's the way we're thinking, and that's why we took that approach to centralize data.
Yes.
I have actually a two-part question. One is, I was wondering if you could say which, there are 5 cities that are part of the program. So I was wondering what are the other 4 cities? And the second part of the question goes to Megan. I wonder if your program at CEDAM has any plans to roll something like this out in Detroit.
So I'll do my part real quickly. So the 5 cities that were granted by the CFE fund to replicate the New York program were Lansing, Denver, Philadelphia, San Antonio, and Nashville. In addition to those 5 cities plus New York, there are a growing number of cities that we have been helping to raise other dollars and to join our system. And in fact, the CFE fund just a week or 2 ago put out a technical assistance grant opportunity for other cities that were looking to do this. We are very much looking to try to help other cities make this case and be part of this real gold standard approach.
So in regards to the question about having a financial empowerment center or similar strategies in the city of Detroit, I think that is definitely one of our ultimate goals, to support this work in the city of Detroit. However, in my development of the Michigan Communities for Financial Empowerment Network, I actually chose to focus on smaller cities that have the same similar urban challenges, decreasing tax base, decreasing public revenue sharing from the state governments, vacant property. We're sort of microcosms of the challenges facing Detroit. So first looking to Lansing. I've also had some conversations in Kalamazoo, Michigan, Flint, Michigan. I think it is sort of smartest for us in our development to work out this model, to replicate this model effectively with fidelity to New York's original model in cities that are facing similar challenges to the city of Detroit, but maybe not quite at the scale that the city of Detroit is facing. Now we actually have a particularly unique challenge in that the city of Detroit has an emergency financial manager. In the city of Flint, where there is also an emergency financial manager, have had conversations with their mayor, and we've actually talked about working through the county government, so that could be a potential for the city of Detroit. So I guess the short answer to your question is yes. We would love to bring this to Detroit, but I would like to sort of work out the pieces of how we make this happen in Michigan communities in some smaller cities first.
To that same point, Detroit LISC has established, along with United Way and the Social Development Fund, has established Centers for Working Families in Detroit. And I guess are piloting a similar type program here in the city as we speak.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to clarify. There are similar models that integrate one-on-one financial counseling with supportive services, some of those being centers for working families and financial opportunity centers. There is a network of centers for working families in the city of Detroit, and I would love to see that network begin to, as the city government works through their current issues, I would love to see that network of centers working families begin to integrate with the local government and expand to other partnerships beyond that usual scope of nonprofits.
Yes, sir.
So what's the nexus of all those programs? You've got the programs you just mentioned, and then bank-ons and a number of other approaches. Is there a logical place for these programs to achieve that integration you just spoke to?
Well, that's a great question. That's exactly the question that led us to create the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund. We just announced a national Bank On 2.0 approach as well. We really believe that this is the snake oil that I sell. I believe that it is through local government, whether it's the city or the county, it's through local government that you're able to really achieve measurable scale. Local government literally touches the people in need already. Local government controls, generally speaking, program structure. Local government is nimble enough to really be smart about what's working and what's not and how to fix it. And so when we take a look at a national approach, for example, to Bank On, it's the same idea, which is there's a range of Bank On programs. I'm sure you know this. And in our collective experience as cities, it's one thing to use the pulpit and to go out there and put together a nice partnership and put together a nice press conference and put together a great outreach campaign. But it's quite another to weave a safe banking product into the delivery of a program. So for example, just one example, and this is what we want to continue to push out in other cities, we have a summer youth employment program. A lot of cities have summer youth employment programs. One year we had something like 30,000 young adults in the program. Well, I was able to go to that commissioner and say, don't give them a check. They're not banked yet. And by the way, they haven't screwed up at banks yet, so they're not going to be so hard to bank. Let's use our leverage as a city, let's develop the parameters of an account that we're willing to broker and sell, and let's make direct deposit the behavioral economic choice that everybody's going to make. Your ability to build an account into the pulses of money that government gives at the city or state level, I believe is really where you can achieve large-scale approaches to banking populations. And we've had, among the many wonderful partnerships with Citi,
right,
we've had that experience with Citi, including with the summer youth account.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I'm just wondering, in terms of approaching local governments, I mean, that's a broad, what department or who do you actually contact? You go to the
Such a great question. It's a really great question. I gave you a little bit of our origins, and it was the Department of Consumer Affairs, and depending on how late in the day it is, I'll say I'm the commissioner, that was dumb enough to say yes. I don't know. But in my coalition, it's fascinating to me because in almost every single city, the place is different. So my co-chair in San Francisco is the treasurer of the city of San Francisco. In Seattle, the nexus was in the health department. And so I think that speaks to the fact that there are different bundles of energy and smart people and political power and local politics that make for the right magic. And we've really enjoyed that experience. And I think one of the reasons that our coalition has been such a pleasure, aside from the fact that we're trading war stories rather than just ambitions, is that these really are very, very different spots. And so when we, as the CFE Fund, engage mayors to begin this work, part of our process is helping them figure out where is the right spot here. It's a great question.
Yeah, I would just echo that the real interest from local governments that I've seen in Michigan has had that same diversity. I've had representatives from community development departments, city managers' offices, mayor's offices, county treasurer's offices, city treasurer's offices. However, I do think that the place where perhaps this work actually happens on the ground in the local government, where their staff support can vary. It is very important to ensure that there is an executive that has the ability to make this a priority of their administration, fully on board and committed. So looking across our scope in Michigan, really looking to see in the case of a council management structure, a city manager being fully committed, a mayor being fully committed, a county treasurer being fully committed. They may then, create a new office or place this within their community development department, but we definitely need to have that commitment from a high-level executive position.
And just a follow-up, Joe and I were just talking, and he was just saying his son really wanted his check, and so I'm wondering, just in terms of, from the participants' point of view, I don't know how much encouragement, how much arm twisting, what do you do to, people want their money.
We're government, we don't care what they think. Look, there are some people that are always going to want to check. Absolutely. There are people who have issues and they don't want, we've got, we did it. We started a lot of our bank initiatives. We started with the city of New York itself. We have 330,000 employees. And about 86% of those employees are banks. So we were trying to identify and go after and learn from the ones that weren't. And, they're the guys who say they don't want their wives to know what kind of overtime they're pulling in. So not that your son is anything other than... He's got issues, and we're all concerned. But so there are definitely some people who are making either bad marriage decisions or in some cases rational decisions that they're, but when you structure a program so that the default is you need to be direct deposited, overwhelmingly people will get direct deposited. And this is I think part of the mix here, which is you can't screw that up, right? You can't then pull people into the wrong accounts. And so part of this equation for us absolutely is about leveraging our ability to negotiate for the best accounts. To make sure that if I'm going to put my mayor in front of a camera to say, come join this program and we're going to get you banked and you're going to be on your way, I don't need a story 3 days later that says that they just lost half of it on overdraft fees, for example. So the responsibility is making sure that it's the right account, using behavioral economic tricks, and learning from the ne'er-do-wells like your son to find out what those issues are and whether you can address them. We did this fantastic study, thanks to support from Citi, again, on immigrant financial services, and we measured the banking journey of Mexicans, Ecuadorians, and Chinese populations in New York, and looking not just at whether or not they were banked and how long it took them to get banked, but on why so many, such large portions, particularly the Mexicans and Ecuadorians, were not banked, and there were real fascinating answers about people not being clear about what ID was going to be required of them, not being clear that the money would still be theirs if they were deported, for example. Some very tangible, important questions that I think help you tee up what your education is, help our banking partners tee up what their marketing should be about. If they're trying to reach these populations and the populations don't know they're trying to be reached, so I could talk about that forever. Sorry.
I just wanted to add, I think that Jonathan's answer really hit on the point of this technical term, that magic sauce of local government involvement, because local government has the ability to influence both on the supply and demand side of things in terms of the banking sector, that we can at scale begin to draw unbanked populations into accounts that really do meet their needs, and have cost structures that are not predatory to them as well.
And I just think too, it's important for individuals to have choice. So certainly what Commissioner Mintz had said, you have to be very careful about the type of account and the organization that you're working with. with Citi, we'd like to be part of that, but we understand that there are other financial institutions that offer good products as well. So giving, I think, choice to people, I think it makes them feel more comfortable as well.
We branded, I gave you an example earlier about a couple of the programs. We branded the accounts with New York City's name on it. And this is the New York City Safe account, this is the New York City First account, whatever the different accounts were, and then said, and here are the list of banks and credit unions that are offering an account. Pick whichever institution you want, they're all offering the same account, and we stand behind it. And that kind of brokering works in all directions.
Any other questions? Okay, so now, the scary part.
Anything left?
No, I think there's a few things left. I was wondering if maybe you want to talk about the counselor training and certification. There's a lot of nonprofits in this field. A lot of people are providing financial education. I think that it warrants a discussion on maybe some of the parameters for training.
I'd be real interested in hearing the local experience. I know that when we started in New York, a lot of this stuff is often personal. In my background, I used to teach law school and I helped start a new law school. And in my head, a lot of the way that I was thinking about was in terms of, well, why do you have law schools? Why do you have law schools and why do lawyers have to be licensed? Well, the reason is the same for doctors. The reason is because the help that they're dispensing is so critical and the damage that they can do if they get it wrong is so devastating that there's a state interest in professionalization. I believe the time is right for that to be true of one-on-one financial counseling. And so from the beginning, as we started thinking about quality and scale, we also started thinking about consistency and professionalism of this approach. And so we initially went to the City University of New York. We said we have this 45-hour, 3-credit semester experience. We want you to offer it. We'll help supply the students because I'm doing the funding, thanks to Eileen and others, that our nonprofit partners can only provide counseling to people who've had it. So I created sort of the supply and the demand. We then had CUNY, a City University of New York, offering this class. And little by little, people beyond just our counselors wanted to come. And then our nonprofit organization started to want to send some of their other clients. We also, their other staff. We also then went to Columbia University and went to their Graduate School of Social Work. There are a lot of really interesting connections between social work and the financial part of the personal finance part of anti-poverty work. And so CUNY then started offering graduate field placements in this kind of training and financial counseling work. When we then started replicating, and I want to give credit to Bloomberg Philanthropies for this Financial Empowerment Center replication grant, when we started replicating our model to other cities, we said, this is what the model looks like, this is what the central data collection looks like. You need to come up with what your integration opportunities are going to be in New York, and you need to find a partner in a local university or college that will offer this course and offer it for credit. As I said before, you set your stock value at the beginning. This is professional work. It should be treated as professional work. And we now have, thanks to our replication cities and others, close to a dozen colleges and universities across the country that are offering not just a night class, but a real class on what it is to be a financial counselor. I think that journey toward professionalization is important, not just because the work is so critical, but because I believe if we're really going to invest in large-scale approaches to public funding of this work, I think you need to be able to hang your funding hat on measurable quality delivery. And so that's the way we've been thinking about it, but Michigan is newly experiencing this, so I don't know if you were our partners or...
So in my introduction, I mentioned that we had a number of partners who were interested in this space, but we did see that lack of professionalization of the field. There are professional certifications through various programs, but usually more sort of topically focused. So you could be a certified homeownership counselor, foreclosure prevention counselor, but we didn't have offered in our state a program that would certify a financial counselor. And so we were extremely excited with the opportunity to bring to higher ed and higher education in Michigan the curriculum that was used by the City University of New York to train professionally trained financial counselors. What we found so we were working with Lansing Community College is the partner, the training partner, and we found that there are such a diversity of topics and information in the course that what really worked well was to have a professor that could actually bring in expert speakers for the various components, and that worked really well. And in addition, we began to see where we could add in other topic areas or lessons around counseling techniques, cultural competency, the specific programs and services offered in the Lansing community. So at the end of the course, after we got through all of the financial topics and how to negotiate with creditors and the things that came to us from New York, we were able to build in some lessons specifically around the Lansing landscape, the specific financial challenges and barriers to financial stability in Lansing, and where counselors could actually send people to access appropriate programs and services. Another thing that we're working on in Michigan, and we're hoping can be useful to the CFE fund, is how to integrate remote learning experiences with the course at Lansing Community College. As CEDAM is a statewide association, and as we're looking to work with additional local governments to replicate this approach, we need a way to educate financial counselors in new communities that might be farther away than being able to drive to Lansing 2 nights a week. And so we ran the first course, the first personal and consumer finance course last winter, but we're running it again this fall. And it's a hybrid course where we have half of the lessons are in person and half are remote through Adobe Connect webinar software. We're looking as we go beyond to be able to use web conferencing software and things so that we can begin to at scale professionalize this field without having to take the curriculum to a different community college in every city in Michigan. So I think that in addition to the financial topics and the counseling technique topics, the lessons, there's a specific attention, at least in Lansing and in Michigan, to how do we ensure access to this through adult learning capacities and through remote ways to access this training remotely.
Okay, we're getting to the close of our time. We want to take a few more questions, but I think I'm going to ask one question of both of you. How does CFE fund determine long-term success, and how does CEDAM?
So I thought a lot about this question. This is a question that we were able to prepare for, and I think that I have several sort of pieces to long-term success. The sort of first phase is a vibrant network of communities in the state of Michigan who are able to embrace this work at the local level in their community, to replicate strategies like the Financial Empowerment Center, but also to come together on a statewide level and speak about best practices, speak about shared challenges, and use this network structure as a way to improve their own individual local strategies. So much like what the CFE Coalition has done nationally within their membership, I would like to see that be created in Michigan with our city and county governments across the state. I also would like to see some self-sustaining components be built into that network. I'm only one person, so I would love to begin to build a structure where local governments like Lansing can begin to mentor and train and teach their peers how to do this work, so that they're very supportive of each other, and we can have new communities sort of coming into our network and being in a way mentored by the communities that have more experience. So the next phase of success for CEDAM is to take this network of local governments we're building within our state and use the shared evaluation. So keeping attention to the same outcomes in the financial empowerment centers that we would like to build across the state, to have several examples of positive evaluation of this model and of integrating financial counseling with core programs and services or traditional programs and services, and have that evaluation and evidence serve as a base for statewide policy change. I think integrating financial empowerment services, financial counseling services with the actual service delivery process of several of the state-funded programs that the City of Lansing has been working through in their project is really my ultimate goal, to see this work reach scale in Michigan.
It's a great question. I have large policy goals, some of which I've mentioned. I believe that one of my goals is that cities across the country view programs aimed at financial stability as part of the base structure of their the way that they put together their anti-poverty programs. I want to help push financial counseling to the level where it would be ultimately state licensed. It would be that professional and that important and that much of a career path for people. On a more practical level, I want to add up the number of people that are literally being served in measurable ways. It's part of the fun of city government is you can only get too wonky before you are dragged into the reality of your responsibility as a city official. It's one of the things I love about city government, and so I really do want to see hard numbers across the country that represent dollars reduced in debt, dollars added in savings, shifts in credit score brackets, and that's what we're trying to do.
So did I predict with that 20 million served?
Yeah, it'll be 20 million with that. Yes. Depending on funding.
Are there any questions based on the most recent conversation here? I'm sure it stimulated some other interest. Sure.
As a native New Yorker and a current Michigander, it gives me such joy to hear this presentation. And I'm curious to know what became the motivation to say, let's take this outside the city and let's make this national. And particularly, what gives you the traction outside of New York City to bring this initiative national?
You want the truth? There are a bunch of reasons. Some of them are political and some are not. But I want to be frank about some of the political ones. I think a lot of us have learned that sometimes our work is most interesting locally when it's of interest elsewhere as well. I'll be frank, the reason I created the coalition is in part because I really felt that the work was very promising. I thought that it had a long way to go in New York, and that one of the ways to get interest in City Hall, interest among funders, interest among my fellow commissioners was for other cities to start investing in the same. And so there was, to be frank, there was a political thought there, which was that a movement attracts resources and energy that I think is how we've gotten to where we've gotten. I guess I would also just say that from inside city government, and from outside city government, the burdens right now on the social network of helping people that are in trouble, call out for innovation. Now, one of the fun things about being in the Bloomberg administration is I've often said I think innovation is kind of our currency. It's what he likes the most. And so it's been very rewarding to try to be innovative within his administration. But this idea of disrupting the equation of we've got more and more demand for these services and we've got fewer and fewer dollars, and trying to think anew about something as tired, frankly, as financial education is a real rush. And I say it not just personally and with my hat on, hoping that people are benefiting from it, but also because I think innovation also brings with it a lot of new energy and resources. One of the things that I discovered early on when we were doing outreach for the EITC is everybody started talking about funder fatigue for the VITAs. And so when we started thinking about tax time matched savings programs, part of our thinking was that this could help reinvigorate funders' interest in the EITC, that if the EITC, if VITAs could be more than just connecting people to the EITCs, which is certainly plenty, but if it could also be about starting people on a large-scale approach to savings, then could you really build a lot more momentum on something that was very important? And I think that one of the problems that those of us in the asset building field have experienced in the anti-poverty field in general is you need to keep the energy up and you need to keep the innovation attracting the resources and the opportunities. So that's the way we thought about it. I was hugely blown away with delight at how innovative my partners were in the coalition. We started with just a few cities. It's an invite-only coalition. We didn't want mayors that said it was a good idea, and we didn't want mayors that were happy to stand with United Way at a press conference. We wanted mayors who were actually doing stuff in their administrations at high levels. Just the work has been incredible, and you hear what's happening here in Michigan. It's electrifying, I think.
Did you want to add something?
I didn't.
Yes.
In terms of your metrics, do you have a control group? Because it's one thing to say this many of our participants reduced their debt this much, but as compared to people who didn't get your counseling, how many of them reduced their debt?
So there are some of our programs where we've done randomized control trials. We've done them in our tax time match savings program and had those studied by University of North Carolina in the most recent version. And we've also done a pilot recently with the Treasury Department through the city's largest workforce development program. It's a parks program, so it's a lot of seasonal workers. And we did randomized controls with counseling there. We've also done some randomized control, semi-randomized control, if that's the right word, something like that, with one of our banking approaches to measure how people are using spending cards and figuring out whether or not you can use aggregate data to determine whether or not people with counseling are smarter about the way they use their accounts than others. So we're doing some of that. We were actually just talking at lunch with our partners at Lansing about different approaches to structuring evaluation. I think evaluation is obviously, for some, the only way you're going to get the public funding that you need. At a local level, to be frank, not necessarily. And so I think sometimes you want to be smart about how, whether, and when you do those kinds of evaluations of services that have, like this financial counseling, a curb appeal, right? That speaks very loudly on its own.
In the Financial Empowerment Center in Lansing, and my work supporting that effort, we have not looked to do randomized control experiment with that specific program, but we are thinking through how we can use historical data from our partners to form, a control sample. It is not by any means a perfect experiment. I think that's one of, oftentimes a touchy or hard challenge when you have a program where you're touching people, you're helping people, you're changing lives, and how do you start?
And it's a public service.
And it's a public service. So how do you start restricting who has access to it? I also think a lot of the marketing and the word of mouth driving individuals to these services makes it hard for that perfect experiment to happen as well. So we are thinking through how can we be creative looking at historical data to provide a control. Another option is to work with some partners where there's a bit more control over perhaps the population. We're actually looking at working with the county parole to do a more perfect experiment where we can have some random selection of participants. But that's definitely a tough piece of this is creating a perfect experiment in an imperfect world.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we are just about at time. I want to thank Commissioner